Welcome to another edition of our Beat Diabetes Books and Quotes series, and we're going back to Dr. Richard Bernstein's Diabetes Solution Classic Diabetes book. I have already shared from this book, but I was reading in the appendix the other day, and I thought, I really ought to use that in our Books and Quotes series. So here we go. Dr. Bernstein, Richard Bernstein, I admire him so much, and I just... I'm a fanboy, I guess you could say, or a fan old man of Dr. Richard Bernstein. I just think he's great. And he and I have one thing in common, and that is we both tested our blood sugar fanatically and found out that high carbs equals high blood sugar, low carbs equals lower blood sugar, and made that the priority in our diet and in our lives. He takes on the issue of the low-fat diet that has been recommended like crazy over the years. They're just starting to back off a little bit, the American Diabetes Association. And they're just starting to recognize that, there might be a place for a low-carb diet in beating diabetes, but you almost get the idea they're doing it grudgingly. They don't want to, they don't like to. They're kind of reversing something they've been pushing for a long time, but they are starting to admit, and they do acknowledge, a low-carb diet has its place. So thank the Lord for that. But anyway, Dr. Bernstein says, if like me, you've had diabetes for a while, you've probably been told to cut way down on your dietary intake of fat, protein, and salt, and eat lots of complex carbohydrate. And you may have even read this in publications aimed at diabetics. So, almost everybody has heard complex carbohydrates. They're the thing, baby. If you'll just eat some good old nutty brown whole grain bread and some good brown rice and lots of stuff like that, sweet potatoes, you're going to be in good shape. The only problem is it doesn't work, and it raises glucose. So he says, you've probably been told that. He says, why is such advice being promulgated when the major cause of such diabetic complications as heart disease, kidney disease, high blood pressure, and blindness is high blood sugar? He's like, all the bad guys, all the complications that you dread so much, heart disease and all these different things, blindness, all of that, comes from high blood sugar. That's the main culprit. That's the bad guy. If you've got an enemy that wants to do you in and destroy your life, it's kind of nice to know who your enemy is. If you're going around saying, well, I think I've got an enemy somewhere, but I don't know who he is or where he is or what I can do. I just think somewhere out there I have an enemy. Well, yeah, you do. But your enemy is high blood sugar. It's so much bigger than anything else. He talks about how that years and years and years ago, they did some experiments with animals. They concluded that saturated fat raises cholesterol. They decided that higher cholesterol means you're headed for a heart attack. Therefore, boom. And since diabetics often die of heart attacks, the answer surely must be eat lots of complex carbohydrate. So get out that brown bread and just dig in. Ezekiel bread, brown rice, and so forth. It never worked. It not only makes you more obese and fatter, it does not do a thing to control your blood glucose. In fact, it makes it worse. So anyway, he talks about how that when he was first diabetic, and we're going way back into, I guess it was maybe the 50s or so, that was starting to become popular, and it became more popular as the years went by, and finally it hit its peak around the 1990s, and now, like I said, some are backing off. But he goes on to talk about how that the American Heart Association, the American Diabetic Association, they've been recommending low-fat, high-carb diets for years, recommending something that doesn't work, never has worked, never will work. Why in the world would these two prestigious organizations, American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, recommend something that just flat will never work and has never worked? And it just shows you the stubbornness of dogma. We come to a belief and we won't let it go for anything, even if every evidence in the world is proving that we're wrong. We'll still hold on to it. Dr. Bernstein talks about a national health examination survey. He says they followed up on 4,710 people, reported in 1990 that in the instance of total blood cholesterol, we found no evidence in any age or sex group of a risk associated with elevated values. That's right. He says they found no risk associated directly with elevated total cholesterol. So everybody's worried about cholesterol. What's your cholesterol? Oh, you're drinking coffee with cream in it and butter in it. I bet your cholesterol's going up. He's like, they've done all these surveys. They've done all this research, and they can't find that total cholesterol makes much difference. But he goes on to say, on the other hand, he says in males age 55 through 64, for example, diabetes was associated with 60% greater mortality than smoking. In other words, if you're going to smoke or you're going to get diabetes, you're much better off smoking. Just smoke those cigarettes. Now, obviously, I'm being facetious. You shouldn't smoke. It's not healthy for you. But what he's saying is diabetes is worse. If you've got diabetes, you are worse off than if you are a smoker. And then he says, it's double the mortality associated with high blood pressure. And again, we've said high blood pressure is a bad thing to have, and that's true, it is. But diabetes is worse. Basically, high blood sugar and its corresponding high insulin, if you're a type 2, in most cases, this is the worst of all. Everybody's worried about cigarettes. They're worried about high blood pressure. They're worried about this. They're worried about cholesterol. They're worried about all kinds of things when the big elephant in the room, the big mama that's killing people and maiming people and destroying their kidneys and destroying their organs and making them go blind and having their legs, causing them to get their legs cut off. The big elephant in the room is high blood sugar and the high insulin, hyperinsulinemia. So he goes on to say, many diabetics were put on low-fat diets for so many years, yet these problems didn't stop. It is only logical to look elsewhere. If you're trying a remedy and you're saying, well, we're going to fix things and we're going to give you this pill or we're going to give you this advice or whatever your remedy is, and you've been doing it for decades and it has never worked, maybe it's time to try a different remedy. And of course, that's exactly what Dr. Bernstein is all about. He says maybe you ought to look elsewhere to elevated blood sugar and hyperinsulinemia for the cause of what kills and disables so many of us. And he goes on to say, my experience with diabetics is very simple. When we reduce dietary carbohydrate, blood sugars improve dramatically. If blood sugars are the things that are causing the major problems and all the complications and all those, the heart events and so forth, and you get the blood sugar down, guess what? You fix a lot of things. So people are worried about the wrong villain, the wrong bad guy. And there are some lesser bad guys, like smoking, it is a bad guy. And like high blood pressure, that's a bad guy. But the worst bad guy of all, the worst villain, your worst enemy is high blood sugar and hyperinsulinemia, those twin evil brothers. And if that's going on in your life, focus above everything else on getting your blood sugar back down close to normal, which of course means you're going to reduce your carbohydrates significantly. And for good measure, as an additional weapon, you're going to employ time-restricted eating. You're not going to graze all day long. Know your enemy, my friend, and go after him with a vengeance.
If you've recently been diagnosed with diabetes and you've just discovered this channel, let me recommend that you go to our Uploads page, which will give you access to every diabetic video we've posted since we began. As you work your way through all our videos, I believe you'll find the help you need. A link to our Uploads page is in the description.